So we have been on a journey. We began this back in December, was the first time I was with you. And we have come a long way, and lots of conversations, lots of opportunities to meet you and see the sights and the sounds of the Annapolis Valley. And so much so that this has created an opportunity for me to really take a step back and recognize what the Valley has to offer. For those of you who may not have been part of the process so far, let me just remind you that this is the Strategic Tourism for Area of Regions is a process designed and developed by our partners at Tourism Atlantic, ACOA. And we've been implementing these across Atlantic Canada for a number of years. I have had the pleasure of doing it in several destinations, but it is a strategic, collaborative, community-based regional tourism development process. And we see that success comes when everybody collaborates and we work together to identify regional strategies to responsibly grow our visitor economy. It is a partnership, lots of folks involved. Our partners from ACOA have been walking alongside of us through this process. The Valley REN has taken a significant amount of leadership, and I want to thank Jennifer and Rochelle for their guidance, for their leadership, for stepping up at the initial stage and saying, yes, we'll facilitate this process on behalf of all of the folks in the Annapolis Valley. And certainly our First Nations and municipal partners are important for us as well. And we've been pleased to engage with them along the way. Tourism Nova Scotia obviously is very much involved in our process, and we've welcomed their contributions along the way. And we're really pleased to have Destination Canada, our national marketing organization, who takes the message of traveling to Canada outside of our borders. Traditionally, they've spent some time in the last 2 years convincing Canadians to travel in Canada, but they're also embarking on product development. And so we're sort of being shadowed by their specialists in tourism development. They're interested in our process for the purpose of information sharing. And so we're learning from one another. And we're learning about what's happening in other parts of the country. They're learning from our process and our outcomes. And so that's been encouraging as well. And I know a couple of our STAR working committee members are on our call today. They've been invaluable. They're my close-in group, I'd like to say, to provide guidance and direction, a sounding board as we come up and develop things. And they've been excellent in their task. And I'm pleased that 2 of them are here. I have to tell you that I've worked in a lot of tourism destinations and across the country over the years, and dozens and dozens and dozens, large and small, rural and urban. But when I came to the Annapolis Valley, and after spending the amount of time I have on the ground meeting you and seeing your businesses, seeing the landscapes, the beauty, I've come to the conclusion that I believe that the Annapolis Valley holds the greatest potential of any tourism region that I've ever worked in. And so you're really starting from a position of strength, and that's really encouraging. And that's because there's a group of proud and passionate people, the residents, tourism operators, business owners, community leaders, and elected officials who are engaged to grow tourism. There is a high interest in regional community tourism development here in the region, and that's a good thing. The other thing is you're starting with a long list of developed, underdeveloped, and underperforming assets. And those things are important to have as you consider moving to that next level of your competitiveness and your appeal. You've got a number of things going for you in terms of reasons why people would consider coming here. The Bay of Fundy, your heritage, your culture, your art scene, outdoor recreation, the wine and culinary opportunities, your rural landscapes, small towns and villages. All of this makes up these assets, these tourism assets that's important to have. Many of them are developed. Some are underdeveloped, or some are developed but underperforming. And some really need some attention to be developed to really recognize the full potential. And that's what this strategy is all about. I have some encouraging news for you as we go forward, as we sort of set a planning context. Things have changed. When I was with you last December, I presented a landscape, a tourism landscape of what was happening in the world, and it wasn't very optimistic. National, international, regional, provincial organizations were not optimistic of where the sector stood, but things have changed dramatically in the last 12 months since where we were in December. The United Nations World Tourism Organization, in fact, just came out last week indicating that they are predicting that global international tourism arrivals could reach 80% to 95% of pre-pandemic levels in 2023. When I stood before you in December, that was going to happen in 2025 and possibly 2026. There's a number of things in play that will impact that: economic slowdown, the ongoing recovery of travel to and from the Asia Pacific markets, where's the Russian and Ukraine conflict going to take us? What's going to happen with that? Those are factors which will impact what happens in our sector, but this is encouraging news. When we look at what Destination Canada is saying, again, they were much more in line with what the United Nations World Tourism Organization is saying. But just recently, they came out and said current estimates from Destination Canada suggest that total tourism spending in Canada will recover by 2024, which is previously than we anticipated. They're suggesting and forecasting that domestic spending by Canadians in Canada will fully recover this year. They're talking about US spending reaching our 2019 levels in 2024, and then followed up by overseas visitation will recover in 2025. So a much more optimistic view in terms of forecasting for the future. In terms of closer to home in a Nova Scotia context, Nova Scotia saw 1.6 million non-resident visitors through October of 2022. That's a 56% increase over 2021 and still off some 20% from where we were in 2019. We know that 1 million of those visitors traveled by road, and that's up significantly, obviously, since 2021, since air capacity is back to some sense of where it was before, but we're still down 27% versus 2019 in terms of those who drove here or traveled by coach or whatever to get to our destination. 646,000 visitors arrived by air. Again, up significantly since 2021, but still down versus 2019. A shift in where your market is coming from in 2022. More Ontario visitors came to the province than in 2019, which is a 26% where we were in 2017, 2018, and 2019. The Ontario market represented 26% of all visitors. In 2022 through October, that number jumped to 32%. So a growth from the Ontario market, which again is in line with what's happening across the country as more Canadians traveled within Canada in 2022 than ever have before, because they were reluctant to travel outside of our borders. They were worried about border problems or not being safe as they traveled. So they chose to travel in Canada. So we saw that surge. So that also led to a drop in our traditional market of Atlantic Canada coming in 2017 and through 2019 at 45% of our market. That dropped to 38% in 2022 because those same Atlantic Canadians were also discovering Canada and other parts of the country beyond the Atlantic provinces. So that's interesting to note. We use our roofed accommodation as a metric for tourism performance, if you will. We know that provincially, we sold close to 2.5 million room nights in 2022 through October, according to Tourism Nova Scotia. That's up a significant amount since 2021 and up over 2019. So we're seeing growth. We saw growth through October in 2022, more than we had accomplished in 2019. Recognizing that 2019 was a benchmark year for international global travel, but also travel to Canada. So it was a benchmark year for us. So we're now exceeding our room nights sold in the province compared to 2019. When we take Halifax, the Halifax region, out of that room nights sold, we can see we also performed well within the non-Halifax markets, and again, showing an increase over 2019. That does not account for sharing economy rooms. That's Airbnb and Vrbo, for example. They booked 526,000 room nights in 2022 through October, a 53% increase versus 2021, but a 20% increase since 2019. That has a lot to do with more availability, more inventory of sharing economy accommodations. So as the market has evolved and more people are more comfortable traveling, especially when they can stay in an accommodation that doesn't see them interacting with people, they can be on their own, all of those kind of things has not only fed the increase in the number of properties available, but also the number of people using that accommodation source. Hotel occupancy or roofed accommodation occupancy, we almost reached 60% in the province in 2022 through October. It's plus 18% versus 2021. And again, a 3% increase over our benchmark year of 2019. Take Halifax out of the mix and similar positive numbers are apparent. Average daily room rate is an important factor as well. So the combination of occupancy and room rate really is an indicator for us how we're doing in that particular sector. But provincially, our average daily rate at roofed accommodations was $168. You can see, again, an increase versus 2019. And similarly, our average daily rate outside of the Halifax market was $139, again, an increase, both in 2021 and in 2019. Now, I just got numbers from Tourism Nova Scotia on Monday, and these set of numbers are through November of 2022. Accommodators report to the province the number of room nights they sell, and so I am able to get a cut of data for West Hants, Kings, and Annapolis counties. And so we sold close to 91,000 room nights in 2022 through November. Again, an increase since 2021, but we're lagging behind where we were in 2019. And our occupancy grew also in 2022. The interesting point here is using that average daily rate that of Halifax-based accommodators in the province of $139 suggests that at the room nights sold that we generated $12.5 million in direct accommodation revenue through November. So that's economic impact directly through accommodations in 2022, which is a significant amount of money. And keep in mind, that number does not include sharing economy rooms. I'm going to move on and into our recommendations and our themes and begin to share with you where we've netted out in terms of our direction. But before I do that, I just want to again remind you of how we got here. We've gone through an extensive consultation process, discovery I call it, whether that be our sessions that we've held, our one-on-one interviews, the site visits, the one-on-one conversations I had with residents, with business owners, with elected officials, with municipal staff, our partners from Glouscap First Nations, Parks Canada, the landscapes of Grand Prix, our heritage historic sites. All kinds of folks have rallied to contribute to the process. We conducted a survey and generated over 150 responses. And we also have just completed a digital footprint analysis, which allowed us to have a look at a very exhaustive look at how are we represented as a destination online? What's our online presence look like? And I was pleasantly surprised by the results of the analysis. I was I was a little pessimistic in destinations that I work in that our online presence is suffering right across the country. We can do a better job, considering the fact that when someone begins to plan a vacation, a trip, where do they go? Some people go to a travel agent, which is great, but others go online. And so we need to make sure we understand how are we presenting ourselves online. And so we factored in the analysis that was done through that particular study. All along the way, we've been given green lights. We've got valuable input, but again, we have received no real roadblocks along the way. And that really begins with our strategy working group. They've fully embraced and understand the development process and have supported us along the way. When we had an opportunity to share what I'm sharing with you today, a couple of weeks ago, we were really encouraged that this strategy must be bold. We must move forward aggressively, responsibly, but aggressively, to make sure we put in place the things that need to happen so that in the long run, we're sustainable and we can continue to responsibly grow our hosting economy going forward. Certainly our municipal and First Nation partners have been instrumental in where we are today. We had a very productive session with our municipal elected officials and town staff, or municipal staff, where we shared our direction, our findings. And we asked a number of poll questions during that virtual session, one of which was, would you engage with and do you support regional tourism development? 100% said that they did. And so that was an encouragement with that as well. We've talked about our partners at ACOA and Tourism Atlantic, and they've been tracking with us along the way. They've enthusiastically supported the outcomes of the STAR process that I'm going to share with you today. And they have gone on to say that they will be active proponents for the implementation. And so we're working with our partners at ACOA to help us understand how we can collaborate with them to ensure that the recommendations and actions contained in the plan don't just stay in the plan, that they actually, we're acting on them. And that's an important piece of this whole process. And of course, our partners at Tourism Nova Scotia, again, are recognized and are excited about the work that we've done to date, and are willing, have said that they will support the implementation wherever they can within their mandates. And so we're encouraged by that news as well. And so that's important. We have 5 strategy imperatives. The first thing, and this is where I'm going to start to introduce some of the thinking around being responsible, to take into consideration things that are in play, whether it be a lack of housing, putting pressure on that because we're not responsibly developing an accommodation base or those kind of things. But we know that we need to be aligned, and that's going to set the stage for success. Industry, community, and government alignment will drive our destination brand, responsible visitation, and revenues that follow. The other thing is the importance of connecting to communities. Destinations belong to the people who call them home. That's who lives here. For many, many years, we've practiced developing tourism without talking to the people who live here. But we've adopted, like many other progressive destinations, a locals first approach. It's destination development with sustainable goals, filtered through a lens of resident quality of life, economic prosperity, sociocultural vibrancy, inclusiveness, and environmental thrivability. Those are important cornerstones for us to remember. We also can't forget about the customer, and being visitor friendly through the visitor's journey is really important. We want to make sure our guests feel welcome. They can access information and services that really contribute to making their visit a positive experience. When we talk about who those visitors are, we are adopting an approach that Destination Canada has introduced in their recent strategy. Destination Canada used to talk about high yield guests, but now they've changed that. The occurrences of the last 3 years have forced organizations like Destination Canada, like our provincial marketing organizations, to look at things differently. One of those things is really to understand what kind of guests are best going to serve our communities, our tourism businesses, the residents that live here. Well, they have identified high value guests as the target our audience that we want to attract. These are folks that appreciate slow travel. They're learners, they're adventurers. They don't pop into a community to tick off a box. They want to stay in a community, embrace a community, get to know people, understand the history, the culture of that community. And that's very much a customer that will contribute positively to not only our visitor economy, but the quality of life and other aspects of that affect the people who live here. We've gone as far as to identify 3 market segments that both Destination Canada and Tourism Nova Scotia have included in their marketing and development plans. These are folks they call authentic experiencers, cultural explorers, and free spirits. And we've got lots of data about who those folks are and what motivates them and how they behave when they travel. Another aspect of an imperative is really our opportunity to create legendary experiences. They're exceptional travel experiences that celebrate our heritage, our local cultures, our natural surroundings, and the rural and coastal communities. We want to create unforgettable memories for our guests, and we'll do that by developing new and exciting experiences that they can engage in. That's going to be important. So with those imperatives in mind, we've developed a very much systematic approach to our 3-year strategy. We're going to spend the first year preparing. And there's a number of things that we need to put in place in order to ensure our responsible success going forward. And then we're going to launch. And we'll put in place strategies to really up our game in terms of what we do to be a viable, sustainable tourism destination, which leads to our opportunities to flourish. And defining what flourish means for us will happen over the next couple of years. It may not be driving more visitors here. Driving more high value guests who stay longer and spend more, maybe a metric we want to look at. But those are the kind of pillars or the kind of foundational pieces we've put in place. So what I want to do is walk you through some of the details that are contained in the overarching strategies, and recognize that there are actions behind each of these strategies that I have reviewed with our partners from the province, ACOA, and our working group, but I don't have time and to go into all the detail here. You'll be able to see that in the final report when that is completed. 4 areas of focus: the transitional implementation plan, considering the projects that are in the pipeline, theme-related experiential tourism development, and creating the Annapolis Valley Tourism Collaborative. We need to put in place a plan that really gets us to the point where we have our feet under us. You had a successful tourism marketing organization many years ago. You don't have one now. And so the steps that are needed to pull together what I call an enabler or a facilitator will happen in our first year. And it'll happen through steps in a transitional implementation plan, things that we will do to make us successful. That's going to require human resources and financial resources. So we need to consider that in this transitional year to put ourselves in good shape to move forward as we prepare to flourish. We have a working group now. What we are going to do is retool that group. We need to bring in significantly more partners. Our municipal stakeholders are currently not at the table, and so we want to add that component to it. We want to make sure we have a diverse group of individuals who come from a variety of geographies, a variety of business sectors, a resident representation, community groups. Again, we're striving to have a group of 15 or 16 people who will be part of this implementation phase. Our working group has served as well. Some of those folks may stay on to continue their work. But again, this is a group that's responsible to advise, support, and be accountable for year one, or hold our entity accountable. We also want to formalize our working relationships with our municipalities and First Nations. We're suggesting the creation of a memo of understanding with these groups between our partners at ACOA, perhaps the province, the working group, and our municipal and First Nation partners. It's basically an understanding of who's going to do what and what will the outcomes be in this transitional year as we set the stage for moving into something more permanent. We'll have to also identify a transitional funding model for 1 year that supports this implementation plan. And that's going to be important as well. And we have indication that we have support from our partners at ACOA in one way, shape, or form. We're working out the details of that, but it is going to take some resources to add to the complement of staff here at the Valley REN so that they can be that enabler for year one to help us move forward. Communicating the specifics of the strategy is going to be important as it evolves, as it develops. Your opportunities to provide input don't end with our virtual session tonight. That process will continue because there's things that will be proposed that you will want to have an opinion about, and that will be an important piece. So communicating where we are with the plan and how it's evolving on an ongoing basis will be important. So putting in place a regular e-newsletter, a website that industry and interested parties can come and see what's happening and contribute, that's going to be important. In this transitional year, we need to explore a long-term funding model. And there's a number of models that we are considering. But again, this notion of introducing regenerative tourism to have a responsible way of developing our destination by thinking of us not just as a sustainable destination in that we're going to be responsible from an economic and environmental, all of those kind of things.
So stupid that they charge you for that.
Well, that's how they work it, right?
An oil filter costing
Can you mute? And whoever's talking, can you mute? We can hear you. That would be great. Thank you. So the regenerating funding model is something we're exploring, where we would collect a fee from the visitor would contribute to the regenerating fund in a variety of accommodation and attraction businesses. Right now, the province is in the process of probably putting in place what would be what we would know traditionally as an accommodation levy. Destinations around the world and in Canada and in our own province have in place an accommodation levy. So if you stay in a hotel or a B&B or a resort, when you check out, 3% is added to your bill. Those funds go back to the organization responsible for developing and promoting tourism within that region. They exist in the South Shore. They exist in Cape Breton, in Yarmouth, Acadian Shores, and in Halifax. So that's something in the works. We want to take that model, grow it a bit to involve more businesses and more people, and give the guest an opportunity to contribute, because what we want to do is create a model that generates funds not only to support the ongoing efforts of our tourism entity, but also to give back to community projects, to not-for-profit organizations, to other activities that happen. The guests that we're talking about, high-value guests, are choosing destinations when they travel that are responsible, that are looking after the people that live in their community, to be recognized as contributing to the health and well-being of not just tourism business operators, but also the broader community. And so part of the concept here is to generate funds to not only fund the organization, whatever that may look like, but also to give back to community projects, not-for-profit community projects. So it feeds into the regenerating model that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So that work in the first year will ensure that we have a model in place to keep us going. But just to give you an example of the kind of dollars that could be created, that if we only proceeded, and again, this is where our committee, our working group encourages us to be bold, to go forward beyond what maybe the province will put in place in the accommodation levy, but to think of other ways to tackle this opportunity to generate the funds that we need, but also allow the customer to contribute to the well-being of our communities. But if we only implemented the accommodation levy, my analysis of the data from Tourism Nova Scotia suggested that we sold close to 95,000 room nights in Annapolis, Hants, and Kings County in 2022. If we take that average room rate of $139, which the province had generated of the room rate of accommodations outside of the Halifax region, that generates $13 million. If we add a 3% levy to the amount of a guest contributes or pays on that levy, we generate close to $400,000. And that does not include room nights sold in Airbnbs or VRBOs, et cetera. The legislation that the province is looking at will include sharing economy accommodations. So the kind of dollars we generated, they're not huge, but they're significant enough to provide some funding for our enabler to do the work they need to do, but also to return some contribution to the communities in the Valley. So just think about, there's 221 tourism-related entities. Our work in year one will be to come up with a formula to be able to say, okay, if someone goes to a winery, has a winery experience, what is their opportunity to contribute back to the community as a result of a lunch they had or an experience they enjoyed at that winery or at a historic site or anything else? The details of that are to be worked out in this next year, but we think we're creating a model that is going to be accepted by the customers and our visitors, but also contribute to the health and well-being, not only of our desire to develop our destination, but also to contribute to our communities. Again, pop in any questions you have about these things. This has generated some discussions in our live sessions, and we've had some very good discussions. But it's all about learning and understanding how we can do things differently, not just to do them differently, but because the world has changed. Destinations around the world are looking at these kind of models. Our colleagues on Vancouver Island had an organization, a traditional destination marketing management organization. In January or in late last year, they adopted a new approach. They became a social enterprise. And so their responsibilities go well beyond those in the tourism sector. Their responsibilities now lie as a social enterprise with the community. And so giving back and contributing to the health and well-being of people who live and work and play on Vancouver Island are important. And so we're seeing models evolve and develop. And this next year will give us an opportunity to learn and develop our model based on regenerative tourism principles. I talked about projects in the pipeline. What we discovered in the work I do across the country, oftentimes I go into a community and there are already projects somehow in the works. Could have been a feasibility study. It could be a group over in one community thinking about doing something, and it could involve any number of things. During my work and our work here, we've discovered a number of those projects. And so rather than ignore them and just proceed blindly, we want to take those into consideration because many of them can contribute to, and are in sync, if you will, with our strategy and the direction we're going. These are things that really connect to perhaps our themes and our narratives. The Bay of Fundy is an opportunity for us to begin to understand how can we make the Bay more accessible to visitors? How can they learn about it? How can they experience it in a responsible way? Well, if erosion and those kind of things are happening in some of our coastal communities, some of our primary tourism opportunities, that's going to impact tourism. So there are a number of, for example, flood mitigation or erosion mitigation plans in place. How can we, or this tourism entity and the sector, lend support to those kind of initiatives? Our partners at Gloosclap First Nation have 2 projects that they're anxious to get underway. And those may be projects that are in line with the strategy. So therefore, why wouldn't we put some energy behind that? Doesn't mean we're going to write a check, but certainly work in lockstep to make sure these projects move forward because they have an impact, a positive impact on our communities and ultimately the visitor experience. So these are important things to consider as we go forward. We learned about experiential tourism and the importance of delivering legendary experiences. What we're not suggesting in the next 3 years is huge infrastructure demands and construction to attract visitors. But what we are suggesting is a concerted effort to create more experiences, building around our themes to deliver 4-season, purchasable, curated, visitor-friendly tourism experiences. We're already doing that in some instances. There's businesses who are operating or offering hands-on learning experiences, for example. We need to understand those that are already there. We need to understand where there are gaps. And I mentioned the Bay of Fundy, but I can see some opportunities to get people who live in our communities who have some level of expertise, who can pass their expertise on to guests, because that's what high value guests are looking for. We've got a really good example underway right now for the last six months, probably 7 months. 3 groups have come together, the Wolfville Farmers Market, the Blomidon Naturalist Society, and Earth Rhythms have come together to generate or develop regenerative tourism experiences. Celeste Devar, many of you may know Celeste. He's the principal at Earth Rhythms. He's one of our national treasures when it comes to experiential tourism development, but now in the area of regenerative experiential tourism development. This is what he said: new initiatives are emerging that are helping us think about sustainable travelers. These are people who are looking for destinations where their travel does not impact negatively on the places they visit. An opportunity to tell our own community stories and how we can present them as new regenerative revenue generating experiences. The Food, Art, and Nature project that they're working on is a pilot project to explore how to offer experiences that reflect the people and stories of the Annapolis Valley. And they are in 6 months into development. Their goal will be to have 12 or 13 new regenerative tourism experiences made available to guests in this coming tourism season this spring, creating a website, creating paths to purchase so people can enjoy them. Many of them are art and food-based and nature-based. There's farm experiences, there's culinary experiences. And so this is an initiative funded by the federal government, a pilot project. We think we can learn from this, that the model that they are creating is one that we can replicate when it comes to delivering, how to deliver heritage experiences, Bay of Fundy experiences, outdoor recreation opportunities. And so we can really learn by this. So we can think about a curated winery experience beyond touring and tasting. An opportunity to step back in time in one of our historical sites for interpretive hands-on learning opportunity, an encounter with a geologist on the Bay of Fundy, a wharfside conversation with a fisher. is an exciting one that several destinations have had great success with. An farm visit to understand how the farm works. You're rich in agriculture. You've got some unique farms operating here. And these are things people want to understand. Rather than just go on a hike, but have an interpretive trail hike. That someone who knows the flora, the fauna, and can make the landscapes come alive. So that's an important piece of our strategy going forward. I talked about the importance of the digital footprint and the lack of a Valley website. So that's something we've got to be working on in the coming year. And enhancing our online presence at the business level and provide training to help operators do that. When it comes to marketing, we want to rely on our provincial partners. And our provincial partners are very ready to take our communications and take them to the market through their web presence, through their marketing program. They have the money. They're already doing it. So that's the landing page of the Tourism Nova Scotia website. If we drill down and where do you want to go, the Bay of Fundy and the Annapolis Valley comes up. We can see some of the experiences that are available in the Valley, and then we can actually feature purchasable product on the Tourism Nova Scotia website. So as we develop experiences, as we develop and collectively gather what we already have to offer, ensuring that they're on this platform, that's going to enhance the ability for guests to understand who we are and what they can do if they choose to come to the region. One of the things we really want to do in the preparing phase is create some kind of entity. And this was a responsibility of mine in my terms of agreement with the Valley REN, that I needed to come up collaboratively, collectively, through our dialogue and consultations with some kind of organization, entity that would be responsible for tourism development and ultimately tourism promotion of the Annapolis Valley. And so that was a big task when I took on the assignment, one that I struggled with how I was going to figure it out, because what I'm discovering is that the way that we were doing things pre-March 2020 have changed so much that we've got to look at things differently. And so I've pushed into some new territory and understanding what could look different. And so along the notion of regenerative tourism principles, the notion of coming up with an entity called the Annapolis Valley Tourism Collaborative really resonated and spoke to the desire and the need to have a collective come together, a broad base of representatives, community engagement, community representation. And when I went and discovered this word collaborative, I learned that you've got a number of collaboratives already in place within the province or within the region. And with that word, it is an inviting word. It's an inclusive word. The term collaborative has come to be used as a noun. In fact, referring to an organized group effort, especially one involving a community. And so what we will attempt to do in the final aspect of the work in year one is form the Tourism Collaborative, the entity that would be charged with ensuring the implementation of the strategy that I presented. And that will be an important piece of our puzzle. And again, in our initial year, it'll be the Valley REN. And then over this next year, we'll decide what that collaborative will look like. And again, with our sustainable funding model in place, we'll have the energy to and resources to move forward. So I want to move into the next phase of activity. We've got our collaborative, and again, there's strategies. Once we identify what that is, we need to put in place a number of things. We need to consider how we position the region. We also want to look at what regenerative tourism looks like and begin to do some training and introduction of how we can become a regenerative tourism destination. We want to identify things that the infrastructure and service gaps, and then further development and marketing. So let me just walk through what I call the launch phase of our strategy. We really need to develop a detailed work plan. So behind this recommendation is a number of tactics. Do we have a board of directors? We need a governance model. All of those kind of things need to be put in place. And we think we need to do that late in our first year and early in year two, and develop a 2-year operational budget to make sure we've got some sustainability in the medium term, again, and reinforce and put in place any changes or tweak the model so that we have a longer term funding model in place. I recognize that the Valley has had a positioning and branding in the past. And so what I want to do is be able to encourage you to engage the services of a third-party professional or organization to undertake a branding and positioning exercise. You need to understand how you're currently positioning the municipalities and the First Nations, and how that can work collaboratively with the new positioning or a new branding. We need to consider that. I spent a number of years in the marketing side of the business. I ran the Ontario tourism account on the agency, the advertising agency side, for 7 years. And then I was the vice president of marketing for Destination Toronto for 7 years. And so what really jazzed me in those days was, oh man, I got an opportunity to develop a new brand. And I learned very quickly that developing brand is a mug's game, because what I think is really provocative or positions us well in the mind of the consumer. If I ask people, 10 people in a room, we'll have 5 who like it and 5 who don't. And so I'm encouraging you, as you undertake this particular step in year 2, to keep it in perspective. It's the period at the end of the conversation that describes the Annapolis Valley. It's a little bit of a logo or something on the first page of our website. It's an important piece, but it's not the be all and the end all. So we need to keep it in context. I also want to encourage you to include some geographical identifiers so that customers can relate to who you are, what you are, and where they can actually go to learn more about the destination. And so including your partner municipalities in this kind of branding and positioning is going to be important going forward. Again, a task for year 2, and one that I know will be important, but again, in the context of all kinds of other things, it's not the most important to be doing. We need to continue to educate ourselves. I explain that I'm doing a lot of unlearning to learn right now. I've been doing this for a long time. I've had models and processes in place, but the impact of the last 3 years on the tourism sector globally has forced some new conversations. And my colleagues and peers around the world are having these conversations, and progressive destinations are looking at a different way of doing things. Regenerative tourism is one of those ways. After our session today, we're going to send you a little note with an opportunity to provide some further impact. We're going to include a quote from someone who sort of summarized what regenerative tourism was in a very succinct way. And we're going to share that with you. In our sessions, our live sessions, we've actually shared it with those participants and had a very robust discussion around what it is and what it means to that person, as maybe as a resident, as a business owner, as an elected official. We don't have that opportunity to do it tonight, but I want you to begin to do the same learning that I am doing right now to understand how we can be doing things a little differently that are going to respond to the changing dynamics in the marketplace, the changing travel behaviors of the consumer and their motivations, and that's going to be important. There's other capacity building or training we need to do around tourism market readiness, enhancing our live online presence, service excellence, itinerary development, how we understand and identify our ideal guests, and how do we cost and price our visitor experiences? So there's a number of organizations that are involved in that and provide training, including our partners at the province. The college here in the Valley has programs as well. And so we want to equip ourselves to be the best we can be. In addition, we need to understand the infrastructure and service gaps that are present that impact in a negative way the visitor journey, whether it's wayfinding and signage, our digital connectivity, business hours of operation, workforce development challenges and labor challenges, service standards, all of those things need to be addressed. And while the entity, the collaborative, won't be the specific one to maybe do the work, we need to instigate and facilitate the creation of mechanisms to address some of these gaps in our services and our infrastructure, and identify those steps to actually eliminate them. There'll be an opportunity in year 2 to begin to further development from an experiential tourism standpoint, but as well as some tactical marketing initiatives. Once again, we won't have significant resources to go to market, maybe like some of our other partners or our other destinations in the province. Many of those organizations spend a lot of their effort and energy on marketing and less on development. Our focus in this strategy, and certainly in year 1 and partially in year 2, is on development, and then the opportunity to go to market. The province is doing a good job of presenting the market as well, to the Valley as well. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers we're generating. We've exceeded, in some instances, our occupancy, the number of visitors from our 2019 levels. So people are coming here, and these are people from away. And non-resident travelers. So we've got some marketing in place. It's serving us well. It's served you well for a number of years. Can we do more? Absolutely. And I think by giving the province ammunition to make sure that we are front and center, along with our other destinations of the province, is going to be important. But we won't have significant dollars to market in the near term. So development will be important, and we need to work with our partners on both development and marketing opportunities. I'm going to just continue just to the last piece because it's really short. It's very short. We've identified our flourish phase as enhancing the programming and development initiatives we've begun in year 1 and 2. We want to expand our partner marketing activity, and then again, continue to expand theme-related experiential development. Much will happen in the next 2 years. So to be able to put in place some specifics in year 3 probably is a little premature. We'll round this out a bit and provide some further tactics that should be explored. But again, that will be in year 3 will be an opportunity to look and see where we go from that point in time to develop another strategy. And so that's really an important piece going forward. So that's really what we have to share with you tonight.